Down. That was the day she filled the bath with Lux Flakes. Best way to soften the skin, she'd said. I remember the towel was twice my size, the hairdryer cord that twisted itself in knots, and the smothering of talcum powder. There was a warm feeling from the cotton electric blanket on my skin, a back to the womb kind of comfort. I recall my grandmother closing the book as I feigned sleep. I think it was something with birds in it. Yes, definitely. It had wings, flight patterns, even the details for the kind of insects they like to eat. There was the warm kiss on my forehead as she turned and made her way downstairs. The applause on the TV echoed up the stairs with the voice that announced opportunity knocks. "Sings like our Shirley," she said to my grandfather as she rejoined him on the settee. I remember staring across at the patterns on the curtain, the ever-changing shapes like clouds rolling across the sky. There was the Viking boat that would transform itself into a burning house, or the woman clutching her infant as she escaped the flames. Images like these would follow me wherever I went, my imagination keeping me ever vigilant. I would have rolled over to my left, as I still do now. There was a yellow haze that spilt in through the curtains, dancing back and forth on the wall in front of me. The leaves from a tree were tapping on the glass as if to come in, and the footsteps outside made that crunching noise across the gravel. It's all very clear to me now. The scratching of keys on the front door as they repeatedly missed the spot. "I just need some space," came her mother's voice. "I've given you everything." "You've given me fuck all," she said. "You can't leave me. It can't go on. Not like this. Not no more." I recall hearing that yelp that would have ripped through my body and torn me from my slumber. I took that step towards the door, one foot followed by the other. The wooden floorboards would have creaked under the strain. Placing myself behind the door, I'd put my ear to the wood before looking. My father was halfway up the stairs. I could see what seemed at the time like red paint on the wall, and on hearing me, he turned. I remember that look in his wide open eyes and the hushed voices coming from down below. My grandfather had scooped me up and placed me back on the bed, as I recall. He was pulling a blanket back over my legs, hushing me to be still. I'd focused on my bedside clock. Mickey Mouse had flicked his arm to midnight. I squeezed my eyes so very tightly closed, and as I buried my face in his neck, could feel his cheek against mine, cold and soft, like a wet flannel. Then there's that memory of sitting on the bus with my mum, just the two of us, huddled together for warmth with chattering teeth. The air was biting the tips of my fingers, clouds were billowing from our mouths. The seat felt all spiky, like the doormat. She'd held me tight to her chest. I felt her quickened heartbeat. Maybe she'd ascended the stairs too quickly. I'd seen the pained look in her brow. And as she pressed the stop button, the bus had come to a halt, and she'd given me her best of reassuring looks. She'd opened the red and white striped pushchair and dropped me into its clutches. My feet were skipping along the stones as we trundled forward. As we come to a halt, I jumped down and she'd taken me by the hand. I could feel the lightness of her fingers against mine. I looked back at when she was telling me not to step on the cracks as we'd approached the church. Falling down the cracks was where the bad things happened, she'd said. I saw an ant who seemed to be struggling, so I helped him along with a blade of grass. It's funny how I remember these details now. Inside, we come face to face with a statue of Jesus. He was nailed to a wooden cross on the wall. Mum had hoisted me up into her arms when she saw my expression. I couldn't understand back then why she didn't try to stem his bleeding. She just smiled at me, dipped her fingers in the bowl, and touched the water to her forehead. I recall walking through two large wooden doors to what seemed like a main hall. I could smell it, the dank, wet air that filled the lungs. I checked behind me at the statue, then hurried on to find her. A sea of candles met me at my eye level. She smiled, then lowered a thin red candle to light another. I would have taken it all in, the closing of her eyes, like she was making a birthday wish or something. And I'd seen a tear on her cheek. "Father," she'd said, Forgive me for what I tell you. I love my son so much. I love his father too. Things aren't right. He's not the man I thought he was. I have to leave. I think this is the right thing to do. And as she'd opened her eyes, I'd wrapped my arms around her freckled neck, losing myself in the rich texture of her hair. She placed her thick coat around my body, cocooning me like pupa, and she'd lit another candle. This is the part of the story I remember the feeling so very clearly. I was very afraid. I knew he'd be staggering about and fumbling to find his keys. It was as if I could feel the alcohol inside his system. There were footsteps crashing outside the stairs to the new house, and then shouting. I closed my eyes very tightly and squeezed the wet corner of a pillow between my fingers, and a voice was screaming out. I heard scratching across the wallpaper, and there was a crash. Something was falling down the stairs. I remember it wasn't long before the ambulance arrived. I can see in my mind the fluorescent yellow jacket stretching across the man's torso. There was a smell of disinfectant on him, and I found myself looking deep into his eyes, like I could see inside him, like I could feel his heart beating. I remember too the trickle of blood coming from her ear. I remember it all now. I recall my grandparents sitting either side of me that day. My grandmother's warm hands were gently squeezing mine. The silence of the moment only broken by the crunch of gravel as our car pulled up outside the church building. We were in that Daimler, crawling slowly across the tarmac, all shiny and black like a stag beetle. I remember the outfits people wore, all dark and sinister looking, as if the pigment had been sucked away from the morning. There were aunts, there were uncles, grandparents and cousins, all assembled outside St Mary's Church. Even the strangers clung to the moment like scavengers, feeding on the emotions in silence. I can remember the oil-slick sensation sloshing back and forth inside me. I can even see now the slabs sitting upright in the grass. Awkward teeth left a sallow in the gaping void of the cemetery, like deep grey epitaphs, with only insects as company. I could feel the cold mist on my face as the gathering came to a circle. We're gathered here today. That's pretty much all I heard. The voices in my head were blocked out by other words. My grandmother had pulled me in close, and I'd withdrawn deeper into her arms. Her emotions and her tears. I'd taken them all as mine. While savouring the warm metallic flavour on my tongue, I'd just watch, and all I could sense was the feeling of gravity pulling me down, deeper into the earth. That's it.